These plant-based nachos were built from the ground up. Homemade pumpkin flour tortillas, a pumpkin mock queso, seitan that was marinated carne asada style, a pico de gallo made with heirloom tomatoes, and guacamole. Gonna start by marinating our seitan. I made seitan the other day. I froze the leftover seitan steaks I didn't use, and I took 2 out to thaw. I'm going to chop up some cilantro for the marinade, and then I'm going to take the seitan and I'm going to slice it very thinly, and then I'm going to chop it up into little pieces. And I'm going to squeeze, I've got oranges and limes. I'm going to marinate this in both. So I'm going to start by squeezing some lime juice onto my seitan. I'm going to attempt to do this one-handed so I can film it. There we go. Got some lime juice on there. And I'm going to do the juice of 1 lime for this. So I'm going to get the other half. So this is an authentic carne asada marinade that I'm using on our seitan, and it honestly tastes very similar to carne asada. On the nachos, I really can't even tell the difference. I'm gonna squeeze the juice of 1 orange. This is a lot harder to squeeze one-handed. I'm just trying to give you the idea. Okay, gonna add some garlic in there, and I'm gonna chop up a jalapeno. Gonna very finely dice it and get that added into the mix. And this is a mild jalapeno, so I'm adding a decent amount here. All right. Next, I'm gonna add some pepper. I'm going to add some salt. I'm preparing this much earlier in the day. I'm going to do a lot of the preparation for these nachos ahead of time. It makes it a lot easier when I go to put it all together. And I just added some olive oil. I'm gonna, because this is raw, I'm actually gonna cook this in its marinade, so I didn't use a lot of olive oil because I'm gonna keep everything that's in there. Now I'm gonna make the pico de gallo. I've got salt, pepper, garlic powder, a couple of beautiful heirloom tomatoes, jalapeno, cilantro, cumin, and some garlic, half of a purple onion, and some lime. So the onion is actually left over from the marinade, and I'm going to use some of the other half here. And look at these tomatoes. Does that not just scream fall to you? These are gorgeous, and I was just super excited to use these because of their color, and they have a sweetness that regular tomatoes don't have. So I cut this heirloom tomato up, got out the seeds, and I'm just chopping it up to start our pico de gallo. I'm going to do the same thing with this gorgeous orange tomato. I set aside some of the first tomato. I'm going to use that in some guacamole that we're going to make later. So I've got my tomatoes in here, and the colors are just so pretty to me. That's really important to me. I think God is an artist. All of the beautiful things that he gives us that we find in nature, the mountains, snow, these heirloom tomatoes, all beautiful. All right, next I'm going to chop my jalapeno, and I'm going to chop it all up, but I think I'm going to use probably about half of it because I don't have a ton of pico de gallo I'm making here. So I think half will do. And I'm just going to stir it around and see how it disperses in there to kind of tell how much I'm going to add. I do a lot of things by sight when I'm cooking. But yeah, see, that looks like a good amount there. I'm going to set the other side set aside the other half for the guacamole. Now I'm going to chop up some cilantro. A little known fact about cilantro is that about 4 to 14% of the population actually finds that cilantro tastes like soap. It's a genetic thing. It's in their genes. And interestingly enough, both my dad and Dave think cilantro tasted like soap. I don't know of a great substitute in place of cilantro in Mexican cuisine because it has such a distinct flavor. But of course, whatever, I always say parsley just because it's so neutral and so mild, but really whatever herb you like, you could use in there. And it would probably work. Maybe even a basil. But cilantro is it for me. I'm glad it doesn't taste like soap to me. So I've got the cilantro mixed in there, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm kind of going by sight to see how it's like dispersed in there, to know the amount that I'm putting in, and I think that looks good. So now I'm going to chop my red onion, and I'm finely dicing this. Gonna probably use, I cut it in half, and then I'm using half of that half. So I'm using a quarter that I finely diced, and I'm going to mix that in. Taste your onion, because if you have a super pungent, strong onion, you're not going to want to use as much as like a more neutral tasting onion. This one has a more neutral flavor, so I know I can put, a fair amount in there, and it's not going to be overpowering. So it's always a good thing to taste as you go along. I'm sure that does not need to be said, but I definitely taste my things as I go along. Gonna add some garlic and get that in there. If you prefer to chop up your garlic and use fresh garlic, some people find it tastes better, then that's all you, go for it. I think it's garlic can get sticky when you chop it, so to me it's easier, and I don't notice the taste difference as much. It may not be quite as strong as the freshly chopped garlic, but that's okay. I like to use the pre-chopped. Gonna take my half of the lime and juice that into our pico de gallo. And mix it up. Fresh pico de gallo is so good to me. I literally could eat it plain. It's really good. And again, these heirloom tomatoes have a sweetness to them, especially the orange colored one. It's got a real sweetness to it in a very good way. Gonna add some salt, garlic, some cumin, and some pepper. And it's done. The pico de gallo is done. I'm going to give it a taste. I wish I could convey how good this pico de gallo is. Gonna cover it, set it in the refrigerator until later when we go to put the nachos together. So now I'm gonna make some pumpkin flour tortillas. I've got some white wheat flour, olive oil, salt, about a cup of pumpkin puree, and some baking powder. If I have not mentioned it, white wheat flour is a whole grain that tastes lighter than whole wheat flour. So if you're not a fan of whole wheat flour, try white wheat if you're looking to eat more whole grains, because it has a much, like I said, lighter taste, and it's pretty palatable. So I've got 3 cups of flour in there. I've got a teaspoon of salt, And I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And flour nachos obviously are different than corn nachos. You could make them, or corn tortillas. You can make them either way. I wanted to do some flour ones, so that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of warm water, a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and then I'm gonna add my cup of pumpkin puree. So the other day I baked some pumpkins and pureed a big bowl, this bowl actually, full of pumpkin puree, and used some of it, and then I froze 1 cup portions of the rest of it. And I'm gonna be making so many pumpkin things, starting with this. I made some pumpkin soup and now I've got my dough. So you just make it into a dough. I'm gonna divide the dough in half. I'm gonna divide it in half again and again and again until I have 16 dough balls. I'm gonna heat my pan on just under medium, and I'm going to roll these out by hand. It's gonna be quicker if you have a tortilla press. I don't have one, so I'm gonna hand roll them, but you wanna get them pretty thin, like this. And they cook very quickly. Just gonna put it in my pan, and see the little brown spots? You want that, but you don't want it to be, you still want the tortilla to be soft. So I am just going to make each of these 16 tortillas. I'm covering my dough with a damp paper towel just to keep it moist while I roll it out. And the pumpkin flour tortillas are done. Now it's much later in the day. I've got a pot of water I'm going to bring to a boil. I have just a few potatoes here, and I'm going to peel them and chop them up. Got an onion, going to do the same thing, just a rough chop, and I'm going to boil them in that pot. All right, now I'm going to take our pumpkin flour tortillas. I'm going to cut them into chip-sized pieces, take my triangles and put them on the parchment lined baking paper because I'm going to bake them. And these don't take very long to bake. I'm going to bake them probably for a total of 7 or 8 minutes or so. I'm going to check them every few minutes. And I'm going to take some oil and kind of just rub it all over these chips, and or soon to be chips. Much healthier than frying it. If you fry it, it's going to absorb a lot more oil than this, but there is some oil on there. If you want to be more sophisticated than I am right now, you can use a pastry brush, but I'm going to use my hand. And now I'm going to stick these in the oven, and my temperature's at 350. Now I'm going to get started on the guacamole. For the guacamole, I have a scarce amount of onion and cilantro there from earlier when we made our pico de gallo. But we've got more cilantro, more onion, got our beautiful heirloom tomato, and an avocado. Just gonna scoop this up, put it in the bowl, and smash it up. Like that. Now, I'm going to add my tomato that I chopped up. Now I'm going to chop up the cilantro. Again, I'm kind of going by sight to determine how much of each thing I want to put in there. So I've got my cilantro, avocado, tomato, and I'm going to put in some onion. A fine dice. And I'm just adding a bit here. mix it all around so I can see if I need to add more, and I think we're good. Gonna do the one-handed juicing of half of a lime. And that'll be a good amount for that. And now I'm gonna add a little bit of cayenne pepper. I mean, you can add as much as you want. I'm gonna add a little more. But I'm just gonna add a little. Gonna put in some salt. And our guacamole is done. Gonna put this in the refrigerator with our pico de gallo and start on our mock queso, our pumpkin queso. I soaked some cashews, so I've got about a cup of soaked cashews, garlic powder, onion powder, some things there, jalapeno onion. I've got some chipotle peppers and adobo sauce, and the potatoes and onions that we boiled. Also have some nutritional yeast. Don't want to leave that out. I'm going to blend this in 2 batches. So I'm going to put half of the potatoes and onions in, half of the soaked cashews in. I soaked these for a few hours. It makes them soft and easy to blend. I'm going to add some vegetable broth in there. I ended up adding probably twice that amount of vegetable broth for it all to come together. Now I've got about a cup of pumpkin puree that I'm going to add into a pot. And then I'm going to add our blended mixture in there with it. So we've got our cashew sauce, we've got pumpkin, and what's going to make this taste like a nacho cheese sauce are the other things we're going to add in there, because right now it's just mild and neutral. The chipotle peppers are going to add a great smokiness. I've got the jalapeno and onion that I'm sauteing first, and then going to add that in. And we are one step closer to this tasting like a nacho sauce. What's really going to give it some cheesy flavor is this nutritional yeast. If you're not familiar with it, it tastes kind of like a cheese puff powder. So I'm going to add the rest of this bag in there. And this has vitamin B12, which if you don't eat meat is difficult to get. So this does contain it. I'm going to add some onion powder and some garlic powder, my go-tos. I'm just going to stir this. Oh yeah, I'm going to add some salt too. All right, now I'm going to stir it. And this looks like queso to me, and it tastes amazing. The pumpkin in there is really good, and it works really well with the nachos, surprisingly so, or maybe not so surprising if you've had it before, but it's really good. I can't get enough of it. I'm glad I made a big pot of it. I'm going to use my same pan that I cooked the onion and jalapeno for the nacho fake cheese sauce to saute the seitan asada that we marinated earlier. So I'm just going to get all of that into the pan with the marinade. And I'm just going to basically warm it up and get some color on there. So kind of like that. And now I'm ready to build the nachos. Gonna take some of our homemade pumpkin flour tortilla chips. Get those piled up here. Gonna add some of our pumpkin cashew queso on here. A little bit more. And a little bit more. Does that not look like nacho cheese sauce? It certainly does. All right, gonna add some of our seitan asada. And this is really good. I tasted it. You can taste the citrus in there, the lime and orange and the cilantro and the garlic, and it's just really, really good. Gonna add some of our pico de gallo with our heirloom tomatoes. our homemade guacamole. And this is what dreams are made of. My dreams anyways. Nacho dreams. Look at that. I cannot wait, as usual, to eat these.
Good news, good news, good news. That's all they wanna hear. No, they don't like you when I'm done. But when I'm flying, no, it make them so uncomfortable. So different. What's the difference? There's a whole lot more for me waiting on us.
Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you next time.